Hey, good morning. Since this assignment actually involves the scenario of teaching History 221, it's interesting that I have taught that for Liberty University for the past 11 years, so I know the subject very well. One of the great events that my students always find of interest is the Salem witch trials of the late 1600s. And these religious dissidents, are fleeing persecution from England, and they bring with them many pagan beliefs. And among those beliefs are the ideas of witch hunts and witch trials. And they're very unsure of their relationship with the spirit world and with things like evil and good. And so it's not unusual that this chaos that happened in Salem came about as a result in which 22 individuals, one man, 21 women, were put to death for being witches or consorting with the devil, trying to bring harm to the community of faith. And so there are several materials in our research this week that I found that I thought would be very helpful to my students. I encourage alternate reading, and I encourage them to be more involved in learning about the depths to which we can kind of plumb these historical events and do almost a forensic analysis of the event themselves. One of them is Christopher Trigg's book, The Devil's Book at Salem, in which it kind of juxtaposes the other books against the Bible. And in this economy, there is a fear of other books. I mean, it's really interesting that these kind of fundamentalist religious societies in which I've spent a lot of time researching always have fear of other writings. In Afghanistan recently, the Taliban began burning books because they're the way that people's minds are changed and they're influenced in different ways. And that's happened at other times in Nazi Germany. It happened in this society of the Puritans, in which they saw people taking pieces of scripture and writing other books, trying to rob or steal the authority away from the Bible. And the other instance that Christopher Trigg talks about in this book is that he investigates the written materials of Cotton Mather, who is the primary preacher in this witch hunt, on the events. And he uses the testimony to examine the lack of spiritual discernment among the people involving issues like witch hunts. And that included the clergy as well. And so clergy are very much involved in this event. Their fears of the unseen world are exposed in the trial, and it questioned their kind of nice, neat, orderly view of the world, which separated the seen from the unseen, and the spirit world from the physical world. And so you'll find that very interesting. This attack on other books was very much part of that. The second material that I looked at that I thought would be very helpful is Molly Farrell's writings called The Witch Hunts and Census Conflicts, Becoming a Population in Colonial Massachusetts. And her writing examines a problem that these early settlements were having with the Crown in England of not providing clear census records for whatever purpose. And Farrell will probe this resistance, this struggle that you have in Massachusetts with other settlements about providing these census records, and the interweaving of religion and political responsibility, resulting in religious leaders prying into what they call the health of the community, which they saw as their responsibility. But it was much more about prying into women's issues, like, notably things like sex and pregnancy and birth rates and reproduction, prying into the bedroom. And it was almost, lurid in detail in these witch trials, because they would strip a woman, and it was mostly women that were on trial because they were the weaker vessel. They were much more given to succumbing to the devil's tricks. And so they would go over their body, and any moles or aberrations they found on the woman's body, they would probe it with a pin to see if it bled. And if it bled, it was normal. If it didn't, it could have been a tit by which they suckled the devil. And many women were convicted based on that. But it was much more kind of almost like a lurid interest of these men and the ideals of sex and what went on in the bedroom and all those things. So that became it's a very interesting way to look. There's several ways to look at Salem witch trials, but this is one of them, that there was this sexual connotation within a community that was almost anti-sex. The third source that I found interesting was Thomas Holmes' book on Cotton Mather and his writings on witchcraft. And he makes the point that Cotton Mather, who, as I've already said, was the primary preacher in this group of clergy that brought these trials about, that his writings were primarily about witchcraft. He wrote a great deal about the subject, and he's kind of preoccupied with that in finding those that may be hindering the body of believers in a place. And also the fact that even after 6 months after these witch trials die away, at the same time, there's over 11,000 killed in Europe at the same time that this is going on in New England. So the witch trials are very prevalent across the Western world. But that 6 months after these trials were completed, he apologized for his mistakes, that he was wrong. But Holmes raises the issue of why that did not hurt his popularity as a preacher or among other people, that they had such great respect for him as a man of God, that this mistake, even though there are 22 people that lose their life, is not enough to change their feelings about him as a man of God. I think that's quite interesting. When we see that today in our own world, preachers can do anything. They can endorse any political candidate. They can, do things and mix politics and religion, even though they'll hide behind the separation of church and state, but they'll use that to their advantage, almost as a weapon. But nothing seems to ding their popularity or hurt them. So the Salem witch trials to my students are something of real interest because it is such an unusual event as we kind of do a forensic analysis, trying to understand how these things happened and how they still happen. And it's really an interesting way to kind of juxtapose religion and history and understand the main points of that. Thank you.